Okay, so hello everyone. Thank you for coming to this Meet the Lindens talk. And today I'm delighted to have Oz, who I've had several times before, and who is always full of very interesting information, and also Grumpety. First time I'm talking to you, but I'm looking forward to this very much.
Thank you. So am I.
That's kind of hard to believe, actually, because Grumpy and I are like symbiotes.
I just
Sure.
choose to hide sometimes.
You can run, but you can't hide forever. I will interview you eventually.
I will be properly terrified.
No, I'm very friendly. Okay, I'm going to apologize at the top because at the moment I have a really horrid cold. I will try and mute when I cough and sneeze, but occasionally sort of coughs and splutters may get through, and I apologize for that in advance. So let's start off with a little bit of background about both of you. Oz, you've done all sorts of networking code, and then you came in, you've done contributions to the development of HTTP and open source SIP, voice over IP. Sorry, just a sec. And you say you came to Second Life because you were looking for something more fun.
Yeah, actually, that was the big motivation. Voice over IP turned out to be a lot of really interesting technology and some fascinating challenges technically, but in terms of whether or not it was fun, it really didn't. It didn't really do what I wanted it to do. And in the end, making a phone call is making a phone call, and that's not something anybody gets particularly excited about, even if it's video. This is way more fun.
It is indeed. Although I have to say, by now we've advanced to the point where we can run editing studios, video editing studios over Skype, and that's really quite fun. But maybe that's just me. But so you came, and what role did you come in?
Well, my original role at the company was, sort of evolved out of the fact that my previous product had been, I had helped lead the company through the transition from closed source to open source, and then we operated for several years as an open source product. And at the time when I started looking around, I contacted one of my former colleagues from the web days, actually, who was at the lab, and said, what are you doing that's interesting? And a couple of weeks later, I got a call from one of the vice presidents at the lab who said, looks like your background in open source would really help us solve a problem we've got, which was, at the time, they didn't have anybody who was actively managing the open source process and the relationship with third-party viewers. And so that was what I was originally brought in to do, and help with managing the maintenance process on the viewer development itself. And so I did that. That was my real focus for the first year and a half, 2 years, and then it sort of gradually broadened and is now all of Second Life engineering development, which is just the greatest. It's really the most fun job I've ever had by a long shot.
There must be so many challenges.
Well, it's this job kind of has it all. There are an enormous number of challenges, both new technology and dealing with old technology. All of which is from a problem-solving point of view is great. It's no good having a job that doesn't involve problems that need to be solved. but also just, a big part of what made open source exciting for me was that it directly involves you with what your customer is doing with what you do, right? You put out code into the world, and people do cool things with it. Well, that's what Second Life is all about from the ground up, right? We build an infrastructure, and there's no way in the time we have available that I could even begin to express how complicated and intricate and challenging the Second Life infrastructure is. You had Landon on a couple of days ago, and he made light of it, but his team that keeps Second Life operating on a minute-to-minute basis, it's amazing what they do. But we're evolving that all the time. I usually describe it as we're rebuilding the train tracks and the engine from the moving train, which is great. It's a good set of technical challenges, but a much more interesting part of it is the fact that people do so many cool things with what we do. I mean, lots of the feature requests and bug reports that we get, the first reaction is they did what? And that worked. And it's just great. It's just great.
What he means is somewhere between shock and horror.
Well, and enthusiasm too. I mean, in the end, right? It's just like, wow,
absolutely,
it's so cool that they were able to do that. And sometimes it's, oh my God, they were able to do that.
Yeah, I mean, when Mesh came in, I think it was intended for things like houses and furniture and buildings, and you weren't expecting people to say, "Oh, good, hair, clothes."
Well, I can't kind of directly comment on that because Mesh was being launched just as about the time I joined the company, and so I missed the phase of the project before people started doing things with it, and can't speak directly to what the Lindens expected at that point because I wasn't around to hear that.
But Bento, are you getting sort of these shocks with what people are doing with Bento?
I am just.
I think
astonished.
we expected a wide range of things, and it turned out to be even wider.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's a good way of putting it.
I'm amazed by what people are doing with Bento and using materials as well. Grumpety, let me come to you. You started out a bit earlier at the lab, I think, in 2009?
At the end of 2008, very end of 2008, early 2000. Oh, wait, no. That's right, early 2009. But I started out as a contractor for Product Engine, so my exposure has been slow.
Right. But now you're a senior producer.
Actually, director, as of 2 weeks ago.
Okay, obviously my research notes were compiled shortly before that promotion. So what do you actually do now?
Well, as Oz mentioned, he and I work very closely together, and his approach focuses more on the engineering. I'm director of product, and so it's kind of my job to take a bird's eye view of things sometimes and evaluate how things work as it relates to the entire product of Second Life. One of the things I respond when people talk to me about other possible jobs is that I love working with with the Second Life team. It's a group that is mature, professional, committed, dedicated, involved in the product. And this is so hard to come by. And I'm incredibly proud of the work that we do and the people that I work with.
And I would say the things you've achieved is something to be
And hopefully the things we've achieved as well.
I don't think you should leave that out. So, am I allowed? I'm going to say 2 words, and you may say, no, don't know. But I'm going to say animated objects.
Yeah, nice project.
Animated objects, yeah, because that's coming up.
We're working on it. Just exactly what that's going to end up being by the time it reaches the main grid is to some extent still up in the air. We're still exploring what's possible and what isn't. There are some aspects that are still not well understood. But we'd like to give people ways to do skeletal style animation of things that are not a user's avatar.
I like someone's comment on that. Kelly, Stray Wanderer, has said, "Yay! Now the Prims can punch back. Fair is fair."
I love it.
Clearly, that's a feature you need to build in, punching Prims.
Well, see, the beauty of it is that we don't have to build that. We just build the fact that Prims can move, and the residents will build the punching back.
Right. Okay.
But yeah, that's a project we're very excited about, and really looking forward to being able to roll out. And no, I won't predict when.
You two aren't really involved in Sansar at all, are you?
We're not, and largely intentionally so.
Right, so let's, I've got a couple more, I'm starting to ask questions. I've got one here from Prokovineva, and there's been a number of important changes as to how trash is handled. And this is very welcome to the lost inventory issue prevention. But what about a cure? Residents' inventories have pointers to the asset server where there's a copy of everything. Could Linden Lab, not residents, provide redeliver on lost items even of single copy? And Proc recently lost 15,000 items.
Right. We have recently put out some changes that are intended to reduce some of the ways that we think people were unintentionally deleting things, and we fixed some bugs that may have been responsible for things going astray that shouldn't. While it's true that we theoretically have a copy of everything, we don't have a copy of what all your inventory. She's right. Your inventory is a set of pointers to assets. We have the assets. We don't have a record of what those pointers were. Right? So the pointers are ephemeral. They change dynamically, and we don't today have a mechanism for keeping track. We don't have a journal of what all the changes were that went through. That's an area of concern. Unfortunately, solving that problem very likely falls into that project that would take at least 2 years category that I talked about before. That's kind of difficult to tackle on the whole. So we're trying to find aspects of it that we can attack and improve. Yeah, you have no idea how big the trash gets. It's unbelievable. So we're trying to find ways to do incremental steps that that make inventory more and more robust. I have not been able to, if I were to go to Grumpity and say, this is what it would take to completely solve the inventory problem, she would end up saying, we can't commit that large a fraction of our resources for that long to that problem. So we have to find a way to break it down into small pieces, and that's what we're doing. Unfortunately, that means we can't say all the problems with inventory will be solved by the middle of next week, or even next year necessarily.
That soundbite is now going to be out there.
Yeah. Well,
you said all the problems with inventory will be solved.
But not next week.
Yeah.
I would like to add on to that response. We spent a lot of time investigating this recent uptick in reports of inventory going to trash and getting accidentally and getting deleted, and we put in a bunch of viewer side changes to prevent that, and Firestorm has merged those in. So please make sure your viewer is updated. The new Firestorm release has all of them, and even some that we haven't released but are in the latest maintenance RC viewer. I would also like to use this platform to say that we absolutely need viewer logs from the session where the deletion or the disappearance of inventory happened to continue to diagnose this problem. So if you are in a position to provide those logs from the session where the inventory loss happened, please do. There are multiple JIRA that are already open. File a new one, reply on the forum. We'll see all of them, and I will be thrilled to take this up and find the cause of what's been going on.
Yeah, that's a point worth emphasizing. We only keep the logs that record what's going on. Well, we don't keep all the logs for a long time. We couldn't. They're just too big.
Yeah.
So if you report that 3 weeks ago I lost 100,000 things, there is no hope whatsoever that we are going to learn anything from that report. Those logs are long gone. We cannot tell what you did or what happened to what you lost. If you report it the day that you lose something, and we see that report, and we're watching those reports. We have people who watch those reports all the time. And you attach a viewer log, and there's a page on the wiki about how to find the logs. And you tell us, I was in this region at this time, and the following stuff disappeared, or even I was in this region at this time, and then 2 hours later, I noticed that stuff, and I knew that I had it then, and 2 hours later, I noticed that it was all gone. That gives us a window there's some hope of us finding information about, and we can use that information to figure out what happened. We often will not be able to recover your lost items. It occasionally happens, but it's unfortunately it's not the norm. But it would be an enormous help to us to get reports that have that kind of information on them promptly, so that we can dig out and try to learn what happened and what went wrong, and then at least those cases we can fix.
So, for the record, in all of the reported cases where we were able to get logs from the server side for this inventory loss and actually find the log records for when the deletions happened, from our end, it looks like it was a regular case of the user deleting inventory. So in order to figure out what's going on, we absolutely need viewer logs so that we know what the viewer was doing and why those messages were sent to delete inventory if you did not intentionally do it, which is why we need viewer logs as well.
Right, thank you. I've had a question from Alex Bonham about whether the Snow Globe viewer could come back. He says he loved it, but can't use it anymore. And I will say, someone has suggested using the Cool VL viewer because that's based on Snow Globe.
Well, even the
can you tell
official
us-
Linden viewer is based on Snow Globe.
Right.
We merged the changes from nearly all the changes from Snow Globe back into the main viewer. The only exceptions were things that were so much a part of the Viewer 1 interface that there was just no meaningful way to change that. So, sure, you can use the current descendant of Snow Globe. It's the viewer I'm running right now.
Fantastic.
But we're not going to go back and rebuild that old interface again.
Okay. Right, so another couple of questions.
Oh, by the way, the main reason for that was we couldn't afford to keep maintaining 2 viewers.
Right.
We were putting a lot of effort into making a distinction between Snow Globe, the open source version, and the partially closed source Linden version. That was just not sustainable. They were rapidly diverging. It was getting harder and harder and harder to do. The only choice was to put them back together again and put all our efforts into one really good viewer, and that's what we've been doing ever since.
Yeah, I like Dory Bernstein's comment on that. Dory's envisaging a large trash dump somewhere behind the employee washroom. Raven Tomewitch says, is there a known issue with buildings being deleted that are locked and no modify by others? And Raven says that buildings that were set out on my land keep being deleted, but no one has mod rights to them. That sounds like something you should discuss with your estate manager, unless you're the estate manager yourself, Raven.
That does not ring a bell. I haven't seen anything like that. Have you, Grumpy?
It doesn't ring a bell. It's probably worth searching in Jira, and if you have talked to your estate manager and you're sure that that is not the issue, you could file a Jira, and we would be happy to troubleshoot. Again, I'm going to use this soapbox to say we triage incoming bugs pretty much every day. Sometimes we skip a day when there are other things that get in the way. We triage incoming feature requests on a regular basis as well, not quite as frequently. And we pay attention to what's going on. It is our hand on the pulse, and it is also your best bet for getting bugs addressed. If you write about a bug on the forum, maybe somebody else will file it, but maybe not, and maybe it will never get to us. If you are sure it's a bug, write a Jira, and then we'll see it.
Okay. Eric Mondrian says, for those who may not have heard about it yet, can you talk a little about the recently announced Windlight extension project?
That's EEP, Enhanced Environment Project, EEP. That's one I've been wanting to do for a long, long time, and I'm really excited that we're making progress on it again. We're going to be doing a bunch of things to provide some new characteristics of the environment that you can modify, and some new ways that you can sort of manage those environment settings. Our belief and our hope is that we will be able to make them into assets, so you'll be able to give someone else a sky setting object, and they'll be able to apply it to their region, just the way you do now with, say, an avatar shape. and that's a pretty cool thing that we never got around to doing on the earlier iterations of the project. We have not sort of finalized which of the grab bag of possible extensions we're going to end up doing, and we may end up with more than one iteration of the project to do it in chunks. And we're going to the other thing we're going to do is add changing settings to the things that an experience can do, so that if you're in an experience, it can change your individual settings, so that as you move through an experience, it can change whether or not there's fog, whether or not, what the character of the light is, and so on.
That would be wonderful. So as you walk down a road, the mists start to rise. Right.
My favorite example is one from a game that I was seriously addicted to for a while, where as you lost health, you got tunnel vision, and like everything got darker and darker and darker, and that's the sort of thing you could do with it.
That sounds amazing. Yeah. One thing I was going to ask about the Windlight extension, would that affect day length?
Yeah, that's on the list.
Yes.
That's definitely on the list. We're going to be able to modify the length of the day. The current feeling is that it should be settable from between 4 real hours to, what was the
168.
168, which is 7 real-time days.
Right, because will you go the other way? Because, I mean, this is a big thing that Jo Yardley in Berlin has always wanted, of being able to set her Berlin days so that they last for 24 hours, corresponding to the real-life time in Berlin. So, when it gets dark on the Berlin latitude, it will get dark in Second Life Berlin.
Absolutely, and you can look forward to the day in the Hippotropolis region where my in-world office is, matching my home in New Hampshire.
Oh, wonderful! So nice to do. So you'll always know when it's time to go to bed. Stop working and go to bed. It's now very dark. Yes.
Right. Right. Well, and I don't need to worry about the fact that it's dark during my in-world office hours.
Yes. Now, I was going to ask a quick question about. We've had lots of people talking about moving over to Sansar. People moving over to Sansar. Are people in Sansar going to get a sense that they could come back to Second Life?
Second Life's not going anywhere, so, absolutely.
Do you anticipate that people might come from Sansar to Second Life?
I have no idea. I have long since given up predicting what people will do and not do in Second Life.
Okay.
Yeah, now it's my job. We don't know. What we have seen is that the excitement and publicity for Sansar has also been positive for Second Life, and we are seeing more reasonable and positive coverage in the media of Second Life than we had for a few years in the past.
I saw a very interesting article the other day that was talking about the possibilities of virtual reality, and it referenced sort of several projects, non-profits, education projects, which I was thinking, hey, hang on, you're talking about Second Life here. You've skipped the virtual reality. This is here and now in Second Life.
Absolutely. I think it's amusing how much things go around in a circle, and how short-sighted sometimes we as society are about experiments having already been done, about existing achievements in chasing the next thing, and the amazing things that exist in Second Life are sometimes overlooked. But hopefully, again, this interest in Sansar will give us, and will continue to give us, a platform for highlighting some of the amazing stuff that's in World.
One thing I was going to ask, okay, there's one question that's coming out from Ravenna Decour, which was, is there going to be some more work done on group chat? Because that can still be a problem.
We don't really have anything on the short-term roadmap right now for that. I mean, there are a few little bug fixes that have been looked at recently, and we'll do. We recently adjusted how notices are sent out in an attempt to make them more reliable, mostly when you first log in. But that was a big project that we did a year or so ago, and we're mostly pretty happy with it. It may well be that some groups and some people on some simulators have very significant delays, but the statistics that we watch closely for how the group chat servers are performing are actually looked at in the large really quite good. So it doesn't feel like an urgent problem right at the moment. We'll see. We keep watching it, and if people can identify specific situations, specific groups at specific times where there was a very measurable problem, that'll give us a starting point to understand whether or not there's something that we can do.
Oh, there's a question here, which I would quite like as well. Would it be possible to set up the viewer to allow pop-out windows outside the viewer's main window, such as setting up chats on other screens than the main PC screen? I must say, with kind of mesh bodies and mesh heads, the number of HUDs one needs to wear kind of just gets ridiculous, and you're kind of peering at a little 2x4 screen in the middle and trying to make out what's going on. I think being able to move some of the windows outside the screen, the main viewer, would be wonderful. Is there any way that could be done?
Well, it's all software, so in theory, it could be, but that's a really big undertaking, and the reason is pretty simple. Second Life, the Second Life viewer and its whole UI system began long before that was a popular thing to do, and it's not really something that's built into the infrastructure. It would be a pretty big undertaking to tackle that. There was a third-party viewer team that attempted it and had partial success at one point, and we followed that effort very, very closely, but they were only able to make it work for certain windows for certain times, and they were never able to support it in any way on a Mac. Which is something we want to be able to continue to do. At this point, that falls into the really hard category.
We'll take a open source contribution.
Yeah, if somebody can figure out a way to do it, we'll take that in a heartbeat.
Yeah, one answer I do have for that is perhaps the solution to this problem lies not in moving the windows outside of the main screen, but finding better ways of organizing HUDs, either creating some location where all the HUDs will attach, or, perhaps as the marketplace evolves, designers will come up with better ways to control the mesh bodies and the mesh heads that will allow us not to walk around with so many HUDs blocking out the world.
Grumpy, I can imagine that it's not a huge problem for you at the moment.
I'm wearing a HUD.
Good. Right.
Just because you can't tell.
Yes, just because I can't see your grin, yes. No, we had, I've certainly noticed since I started wearing a mesh head, there's so many more kind of things that you need to be focused on. And it does get a little crowded on my screen. But, and it would be lovely to move it up. But yes, I can understand that's a very difficult thing to do. Okay, someone just wanted to check that you are going to continue supporting Linux for Second Life.
Well, we made an announcement, I'm forgetting how long ago it was, but it was quite a while ago, that the Linux viewer was being transitioned to a community support model, by which we mean we'll accept contributions that keep it working and we'll integrate them if they're good. And that's how the Linux world works, and that's how we intend to participate in it. We're going to do, after we get our 64-bit viewer out, we're going to make some changes to how we attempt to build the Linux viewer that will fit into Linux development models better than the way we've been doing it. We'll have a general announcement about that, but we've talked about it at the third-party viewer meetings and on the open source list. And we look forward to contributions that help us to make it better. I have to say, as a longtime open source enthusiast, I've been kind of disenchanted by the fact that what we get is a lot of people saying, why don't you do Linux? Why don't you do Linux? And we get almost no contributions to help. So I'm hoping that when we change our methodology to make those contributions much simpler to make building the viewer on Linux easier, we're going to be doing that, then that will make it easier for people to contribute and participate and improve the Linux support. I'm hoping that will happen.
That sounds great. Someone has said, will you optimize Second Life and the viewers for the newest multi-core CPUs and AMD's Ryzen?
We pretty much rely on that level of support for the drivers provided by the operating systems. There's no reason why it shouldn't support those things.
Right, but it depends on the drivers coming through.
Right.
Yeah.
What we don't plan to do is to adopt at this point other graphics frameworks like Metal or any other alternatives to OpenGL, just because that would be too big a forklift change to do. It would mean rewriting the entire rendering system.
Okay. Someone is asking, can Second Life go over to Vulkan? I don't know what Vulkan is, so I'm not sure.
That's an example of exactly what I just described. Right. So no, that's not on the plan. I mean, I'm not going to say never because I try not to ever say never, but it's not on the roadmap. Giant job.
Okay, Wellington Beam is asking, is any work being done on supporting additional account or viewer security features such as 2FA?
Yeah, we've talked about that. And I don't have a timetable for that, but it's the sort of, like I said, we pick from what there is to do. So 2FA, for anybody who is not into the lingo, that's two-factor authentication. So it means,
right.
When you log in, you have to you have to use a token or a text message or something to provide an extra bit of information beyond your password. It's just, most banks require that now. A lot of things provide that as an option. And we've certainly talked about it. I mean, certainly our corporate accounts, we use two-factor authentication. So it's in the category of things that come up so much that it would be silly to assume we won't eventually pick that as one of the things to do. So yeah.
Kenny Legs was just saying, is not Vulkan backwards compatible with OGL?
We're getting too deep into the details for me to be able to comment.
Okay. Eric, I'm sorry, but I don't think these guys can take Sansar questions.
That we haven't done any specific work in that regard, Eric.
Understandable. We have not done any work to specifically allow creators to export things from Second Life to Sansar, and it's not on the roadmap. Whether there will be an initiative that comes down to us, that it's something we should attempt to support, I can't say.
I think just keeping Second Life going as you're doing is absolutely wonderful for me, and I think quite a few people here too.
Thank you.
That's what we're all about.
Yes.
Keep it going and make it better.
Absolutely. Can I just talk a bit about the animated objects, the Animesh, which sound to me completely fascinating. Can you tell me a little about the things that they should be able to do, the sort of things they could be used for?
Well, people do a lot of things in Second Life today that are pretty great, right? They make animals that move around. They make robots that unfold into something else. The examples just go on and on. It's actually, given the capabilities that we've got in Second Life today, it's astonishing how much people do, right? And when you dig into how they do it, how they make things look as though they're bending and morphing, it's often they've done an enormous amount of work that's idiosyncratic to Second Life. It's very, very Second Life specific work. They haven't been able to use tools that are available from outside Second Life to do the work. Frankly, those mechanisms are often much, much more expensive. So it's really hard to get an object to do the kind of things that an avatar does as a perfectly, you and I are sitting here and, thanks to the sit animation on this couch, I'm kind of fidgeting as I talk and my head is moving around to watch things. We all take that for granted with avatars, but getting an object that's not an avatar to do that stuff is a huge amount of work, and it's pretty expensive in terms of its impact on the simulator and on the viewer, compared to the skeletal animation that a viewer does, where the computer says move this bone and then computes how the skin is affected by that movement, and so you see it as the whole body moves in a relatively natural looking way. Getting that to be done using the primitives we have available today for things that are not avatars is really hard. It's fantastically impressive how well people do it using what we have today. And the goal of the Animesh project, if we can call it that, is specifically to give people a skeleton, and in fact, because it's the easy way to go about it, we're just going to use the same skeleton avatars have now, and allow people to rig mesh skins onto that whatever subsets of that skeleton they need, and then use the relatively inexpensive and easy to code, comparatively, mechanisms for animating it that are used for animating avatars, which means you can make animals and robots, and well, far be it from me to predict all the things people will do with it.
But that is amazing, and it will put far less weight on the viewer, so you won't. Yeah.
Right. It'll be significantly less than some of the mechanisms people are having to do now. How large it will be is something that we'll measure as we get a little further along in the project.
Yes, walking tables. Of course, that's the first thing people are going to go for. And yeah, there is a danger, Silas, that Daleks will take over the mainland. Attack trees. They're coming up with ideas already, you see. It's terrifying.
It's inspiring.
Celery stalking you. I like that one. Especially if it cries, eat me. Okay, right, I'm looking at right, someone's just sent me a comment in a note card, so I need to open it. It's from Pywacket Bellman, who's of course a leading tiny animator, leading tiny movie maker, and many other things as well. And Pi wants to say, I've been here a long time and just wanted to say this place is flying compared with where we started.
Oh, thank you. We think so too, but it's really good to know that it's a shared impression. I am continually amazed at the things that happen in Second Life, and the things that are possible in Second Life. At the amount of platforms that are supported, at the connectivity when the Wi-Fi is crappy. I mean, we officially say we don't support Wi-Fi connections at all, but even on a Wi-Fi connection that drops like half the packets, that's crawling, Second Life continues to function, which is amazing. It blows my mind.
Yep. And mine too. We have people in the audience using Wi-Fi who are shouting out of it. This has been brilliant. We're coming up to the top of the hour now. So I'm going to ask if anyone has any last questions. And you could bring back questions that you asked the other day, if you want. Because I know some of you are still in the audience. I think we may have exhausted everyone.
Oh, I doubt it.
What feed are we talking? Okay, how about using the Android app access? Is there any possible projects in the future to widen the capabilities for slower points of access, maybe better text-only viewers? My feeling would be, and you may say this, that the text viewers will depend on the third-party viewer creators.
Well, and there are a couple of very good ones now. So I'm not sure that it would be a good use of our time to compete with them, because they actually already do that job pretty well.
Absolutely.
Linda,
and as for the mysecondlife.com feed, yeah, there are known issues with snapshots not uploading, and they are in our immediate queue of things that we're working on. This probably is not the correct forum for me to express my personal dislike of the profile feed. Not for the function it provides, but for some other details of the implementation. We hope that eventually we'll be able to present a more robust solution than exists today. Right now, it's very flaky.
Dark Tiger is asking if he can have your Linden Bear, Oz. Do you have a Linden Bear, Grumpety?
I am ashamed to say that it is still under construction because I have one and I'm not happy with it. I also could not figure out how to make a small stick figure bear and have it actually resemble a bear. I'm still working on that.
If you look at, speaking of profiles, if you look at my profile, you'll see that I have a standing offer. Show me something cool in Second Life I haven't seen before, and you get a bear. My favorite way to spend time in Second Life, I'm a big Second Life tourist. I love to go to new places and see new things in Second Life, see things that people have done with the product that I invest my days and many of my nights on. So, drop me a note card with a location or an object from the marketplace that's really cool, or whatever it is that inspires you about Second Life, or that it's not as hard as you might think to show me someplace I haven't been. Second Life is huge, and an awful lot of it is really cool. So, thanks, Ravina, but that's not the sort of thing I'm looking for right now.
Okay, there's one interesting question. Are you guys... Sorry, are you guys okay to stay for a few more minutes?
Sure.
Okay, there's a question. We seem to have limitless inventory, but our maximum limit for groups is 60. Can you explain a bit about the difference between an item or script and a group?
Yes. I'd be glad to. I remember that question from Landon's session, and I was looking forward to somebody asking it. An item in your inventory is, like I said, it's just a pointer to something in the asset store, and it essentially has, other than when your viewer's first starting up and you're loading it all up, it essentially has no impact on what you're doing. It's passive. It's like having something in a file cabinet. It doesn't affect what you do in the rest of the office, right? A group, the fact that you're in a group causes your viewer to keep track of a lot of information about what's going on in the group, and causes the simulators, not just the one you're on, but the one every member of the group is on, to do work to keep that information up to date. One of the things we found when we did the project I mentioned before to improve the performance of group chat, we had to study very carefully where is time being spent in the group chat system. It's a separate system that works through the simulators, but behind them. The surprise, we're constantly finding surprising things when we do that kind of study. It turned out that the largest part of the load on the group chat system had nothing to do with actually sending chat messages. It was every time anyone in a group logged in or logged out, a message got sent to every simulator that had anybody in the group on it, and to every member of the group, regardless of where they were. And it turned out that something like 90% of all the messages going through the group chat system were those login and log out notifications. And the chat messages were not getting through because they were in line behind a whole bunch of that other traffic. Wow. So we made some changes that changed how that impacted things. And one of the changes we made was that you don't necessarily get all of those notices anymore. And we'd like to be able to expand that again in the future. But and there are also some other operations that you can do on groups that cause really big and expensive queries to be made against the database that can interfere with other queries that are necessary to make things go. So restricting the number of groups you can be in is, at this point, kind of a defensive measure for the infrastructure, because it has been our observation that people tend to join a lot of groups, and if we raise the number of groups, then people tend to join even more groups, and that's not free. Groups are not passive things that are just sitting in the filing cabinet. They're very active things that are causing messages to be sent around the system, and we can't eliminate that because that's some of the functions of groups. But yeah, so that's why it's part of why we said more groups is a premium benefit, and we review all limits on a periodic basis. We're constant. One of the regular activities that Grumpy and I and many other people in Second Life do is to say, okay, let's look around. How many can we change the limit? So recently we raised the number of prims you could have on a region because we looked at it and said, you know what, we can actually afford to do that. It's not going to have a bad effect on people, and so we'll do it. And we may well. Every limit in Second Life is something that we think about whether or not we can change it on a regular basis. One of the things that I'm particularly enthusiastic and focused on right now is figuring out what the constraints are on the number of avatars you can have in a region and have everything work well, and with the goal of eventually making that bigger.
Which, by the way, we already did change, in effect by adding the premium access feature.
Right.
Yeah.
And I have to point out that when we do look at limits, if we discover that it's a limit we can't raise for all of Second Life, the second thing we say is, can we raise it for premium? We're very much interested in continuing to add value for premium subscriptions, and so we regularly review what we can do for premium, and hopefully have some exciting news coming up in that area soon.
Excellent. We have Alex. We've answered the question about Snow Globe. We answered it earlier.
Well, and it's so old it wouldn't work anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to say something that I've talked about with Patch, which was the idea, quite a few of us who like organise events or manage regions and that sort of thing, we end up being involved in like half a dozen groups. Because we need to send messages or have even less have conversations with, but excuse me. We end up needing to send messages to different subsets of the event. So, for example, there will be a main group for the Home and Garden Expo, then there will be the builders, then there may be the publicity people, the press team, then there may be entertainers who will all need separate groups. It would be lovely if, in a way, we could put all of those into a single group and have the capacity of addressing a subset at any one time. It would also probably cut down the number of groups that people need if it could be done like that. Would that help, or would that just be impossible?
Pretty hard to say. That's unfortunately that's not an easy question. Um,
Okay.
it's tough.
Right. Okay.
In some ways, on the back end, that would just look like more groups, right?
Right. That's a shame. Okay, so let's run through some other questions that have been coming in. So Kenny Lux is asking, have you seen a cell shaded cylinder made with only one prim? I think that's his bid for an Ozbear.
Oh, uh, um, no, but I'm not sure that I would know the difference. A lot of people will find it ironic. Um, I am not a gamer. I am not a graphics person. One of the challenges that I quite frequently face is that people will send me a snapshot of something in Second Life and say, "Look at this horrible problem," and what I see is a beautiful picture. I don't see what the problem is, and I almost always have to send them back and say, "Please draw red arrows and circles on this so that I can tell you so that you can tell me what it is you think is wrong with this picture and what needs to be done to correct it." And then they do usually, and they send me back the things, and then I can see what it was they were after, but I didn't see it in the first time. So that, as you said in your intro from my bio, I came to this from the networking angle, not from the graphics or gaming angle, and it's quite different.
Few more questions. Interesting one from Diamond Merchant, I think. Given that you've just said increasing prims doesn't hurt, then does it follow that big textures don't matter either?
Big textures have a pretty significant impact on viewer behavior. Not the server doesn't care about textures, by and large. That's a slight oversimplification, but mostly the simulator doesn't know from textures. It just passes identifiers from them around. However, they can have a big impact on the viewer. In particular, people running 32-bit viewers will run out of memory because of the amount of memory that gets taken up by lots of textures, and of course, the bigger they are, the more that is, right? So when you make a texture go from 512 by 512 to 1024 by 1024, it's 4 times as big, right? And it takes up that much more memory in your machine. One of the things that we think will probably be possible when we have gotten everybody, or the people who can be, onto 64-bit viewers, is that we'll be able to support larger textures, and that's definitely something we're already working on. So we hope so. We're not really sure what the impact will be, and we're going to try to do some careful science to measure that.
We like to measure things so that we can declare a victory, and so we make an effort to do so at every turn.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Someone has a Namboops resident has asked, might I ask what's at Linden Lab HQ1 region?
Evil things. This is where Lindens do horrible planning and figure out how to destroy Second Life.
And experiments on helpless avatars, I'm sure.
Experiments on hopeless residents, yes.
Okay. I was going to ask you from Kenny Lex again, what are your favourite places on mainland?
Oh, I don't keep a list of favorite places. In fact, I don't tend to go back to the same places very often. I like to just sort of pick random spots to go to and wander around.
Yes, jelly dolls. We ought to talk about those because they came up yesterday and the intended impact of that. Someone had a question about should they just discard all their their high impact inventory, and because, what if no one could see them?
Well, this is really a personal decision on how you choose to deal with the avatar. I have to say the Jelly Dolls project overall has gone fantastically, and we're very pleased with the success that it had. It had the effect that we were hoping for, which is to make both, well, first of all, to make everyone in a cell cognizant of the impact that their render cost has on others, and by doing so, to pressure merchants to actually cater to that need, and indeed it worked. And we had little ticker tape parades in our personal chat messages in our group every time we'd see someone say, I revised my product because the rendering cost was so high, and now it's the same thing, only at a fraction of the cost. And this is exactly what we were hoping for. But we always try to leave the decision up to you. Do you want to keep your beautiful outfit that has a really high render cost? Can you tweak it to make it less expensive? Ultimately, it's your decision, right? And there are possibilities to always render avatars. Anybody can choose to always render some specific avatars, so you and your friends will all see each other. But by pressure, of course, I meant encourage. Yes, Iola, thank you. And there are ways that you can choose to see or not see heavy render cost avatars, and the decision is yours. We're not going to go in your inventory and discard the stuff we consider poorly made.
Yeah, and also just one other comment on that. I think that it's difficult for most people to appreciate what an enormously wide range of users we have almost on any metric that you measure them. We have an unusually large range of ages. People of all ages use Second Life. People of many different levels of experience with computers use Second Life. But in particular for this one, people with a huge range of graphics rendering capability. There are, of course, some people, I'm not one of them, who have super high-end gaming rigs that can render glorious images at near infinite detail with fantastically subtle lighting effects on gigantic screens, and it doesn't hurt their performance even a little bit. And then we have people who have 10-year-old computers that are barely able to do the simplest kind of rendering, and there are lots of them. And so the Jelly Doll feature was designed to try to let everybody tune their own experience to the capabilities of their own system, while, as Grumpety said, informing everybody what's going on so that they can tell. If you and your friends all have high-end gaming rigs and you're the people you want to hang around with, you can just crank that baby up and have your, fantastically expensive rendered avatars, and you're not hurting anybody. There's no reason why we should put any limit on you. But if you're going to go to a very public club with lots and lots of people in it, there are going to be a lot of people around you who, if they don't have a defense mechanism against you, you're going to crush their viewer. You're going to lag them out to the point where they'll get a frame rate of, a half a frame a second. And we wanted to give them a way to say, look, just those super laggy people, I need to be able to see, so I'll do without seeing them in very much detail. And it's supporting that wide range of users that we're trying to do. By the way, if you're one of those people out there who's still got a machine that can only run a 32-bit operating system, or if you're still running a 32-bit version of Windows, we are, in fact, exerting lots and lots of effort to continue to support you, but you will have a way better experience if you upgrade. It's been quite dramatic when we test the 64-bit viewers. So probably your computer can do it. Upgrade your operating system so that you can take advantage of it.
Okay, I've got one sort of response to that. And then I've got one sort of section of questions that have come up about band lines. So I'm going to do the response to the Jelly Dolls, then the band lines. And I think, sadly, because we've got another talk coming up at 4 p.m. and we need to restart the Sims before then, the regions before then, that we are going to have to wrap this talk up. But Grumpety Oz, I would love to talk to you again because people do want to ask so many questions. So maybe we could pull something together outside of SL14B. I know Ziola and I are going to have a chat about ways of carrying on with talks, and I would love you two guys to come back.
Absolutely. We'll be happy to do it.
Yep.
So, Kelly Stray Wanderer has asked, why were colours chosen for the Jelly Bobs instead of something like Avatar Imposters? Have you done any studies to see if, they're all purpley blobs, has affected the new user experience?
We just made them as inexpensive to render as we could, and nice solid colors are really cheap, is what it amounts to. But no, we didn't. I confess, we didn't spend a lot of time on that. We just said, let's just do this easy thing.
We didn't spend no time at all on thinking about this. There's really no solution that would be both cheap. Both cheap and achieve the goals that we're looking for. We did spend some time thinking about the new user experience and how that would affect it. But part of the way that that's ameliorated is by the amazingly low render cost starter avatars that continue to be put out, which to me are a shining example of what you can do for like 10,000 render cost. Ruth does live in the library inventory, but that's also not a new user experience I want. And
you can get Ruth. She's in there.
Yeah, she's there. And I saw another comment go by. We do indeed spend time thinking about how the changes we're making in Second Life impact the new user experience and all of the new people coming in and the learning curve that awaits them. All of these things are absolutely a part of our headaches.
Right. So now I'm going to come to some questions about band lines, and I'm going to run a couple together. Is there a way or a plan to soften band lines so that when you're sailing or flying, etc., you can be rolled off them instead of torn apart and spit out of Second Life if you happen to run into one? And someone says, how about a route planner that will highlight band lines for you when you sail so you know what to avoid or something?
We actually had a feature request recently for whether or not you could change the distance at which you'll see band lines. And that's something we may be able to do something about. I wouldn't do on, I wouldn't or seeing them on the mini map is another interesting idea. But we haven't got a short-term thing for that, but actually those are the kind of changes that a third-party viewer could certainly experiment with, and we'd love to get contributions for that kind of change.
Absolutely. And I would like to point out that we did recently roll out a change as the ban lines comment frequently comes up in concert with discussing sailing or flying. We did recently make a change that allows estate managers and estate owners to enforce rules about ban lines on the parcels in their estate. And so if an estate owner doesn't want anybody on their land to put in ban lines so that it can be sailed around, for example, they now have this ability and are not forced to fly around and remove ban lines every day. Hopefully, this solution is going to partially alleviate the problem, although, no, we've never come up with a way to roll off the ban lines softly. It's, I like the imagery, though.
Right. Well, I know that there are questions out there, and I am really so sorry if we haven't got to your question. Like I say, Ziola and I are going to look for ways that we can continue this with a chance for you all to come. Excuse me once. Hopefully a time when I don't have a stinking cold, which would make everyone's life easier. So I'm going to wrap this up now, and I'm going to say thank you so much to Oz and Grumpety for coming. It's been absolutely brilliant.